world and to the kingdom citizens. I greet you in the precious holy name of Yeshua Messiah, Yeshua HaMashiach, who said in his word, John 8:32, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall make you free. Hi, I'm Dr. John Curry, Ambassador, Pan-African, and welcome to the Embassy of the Kingdom of Heaven on Earth. If you want to follow this podcast, please subscribe to JC Global Embassy TV1. Ring the bell and hit the thumbs up button. Today we have a message for you, and particularly for Black people, Blacks that are descendants of slaves. And that message is, Blacks must detox their minds. Blacks must detoxify, their minds. And we're going to go in on this because I think it's very, very important that we begin to talk about where we are concerning our mental health, as well as where we are concerning move forward as a Black people. What makes this so important is that many times as Blacks, we go along to get along, and many times we really don't get our health taken care of. And what we do is just kind of drift along like a log in the ocean while struggling with some interpersonal things that's going on in our head. Well, today, we want to be able to help you or take you through this by simply with this subject matter of Blacks must detoxify their minds. Blacks must detoxify their minds. And not only detoxify their minds, but Blacks must take the mental transformation in their minds. Blacks must take the mental transformation in their minds. Now, what this means, it means that when we were in slavery for roughly 246 years, and we kind of spilled out into a few other things, and we have a total package of roughly 500 years of just going through trauma after trauma. So we were brought to America in 1619. But what most Blacks don't know is that Africans came through the Caribbean Triangle. And when they left Africa, they came through Bermuda. Then they went from there to Trinidad, from there to Haiti, from there to Jamaica, from there to Puerto Rico. You know, that whole Caribbean Triangle line, and went back to Africa. We went around the world for at least 20 times before the rest of the world caught on that we had great civilization long before they existed. But yet we was brought to America, which I like to call forced migration, which means that we were prisoners of war. We was brought to America in 1619, and we worked actually as slaves for 246 years. Now think about that, 246 years. Then we went through 100 years of old Jim Crow, separate but so-called equal. This was a standard. This was a standard established by the Supreme Court dealing with Plessy versus Ferguson in 1896, which undergirded racial segregation. So when we got here, we went through all kinds of things in these Americas, and we was treated worse than animals. And for those slaves, for those that were enslaved Blacks in America and around the world had instituted a world thing in order to keep us together and to make us do exactly what they needed for us to do. So those things came through the most heinous and vicious, violent acts towards the Black slave as followed. In other words, they had to put those violent acts on us in order to get us to obey what they was trying to get us to do. You see, the slaves went through contextual violence, and contextual violence is also strategic violence, as well as territorial violence and retaliatory violence, as well as ritualistic violence. You see, our forefathers went through horrification, brutalization, and abandonment. But what does this mean? That means that the slave master, every chance he got to beat Black slaves, he beat them. And what's I think is super ironic is that sometimes the slave master would also get other Blacks to beat Blacks. He would get other blacks to beat blacks, so the black slaves that got beaten would not have the anger at the slave master, but the black slave that got beaten will have his anger focus on the black slaves that beat him. And we noticed this, we know about Rodney King in March 3rd, 1991, where he was in a public beating, a public lynching. Then we saw George Floyd with a knee on his neck in a public lynching, public beating. But I believe the Europeans, along with some of the other blacks that wanted to be a part of the culture of the Europeans, ended up beating Tyrese Nichols to death. They beat him to death, and the ones that they put out front was all 5 black males. But what they didn't show was that the one, I believe 2 white males that was also doing it as well. And they wanted everybody to see it. They wanted everybody to talk about it. They wanted everybody to really get the shock and awe of 5 black men beating another black man to death. Well, for me, that takes me back to the plantation. On the plantation, slaves were beating other black slaves to death, beating them to the point of death. And the white European master would be standing right beside them, making sure that they don't die, but beat them to the point of death. So when the slave that was beaten, when he got through being beaten, he would not look at the white slave master as the person that was beating him. He would focus on the black slave that was beating him. And this is a kind of flipping the script. So the culture of the white supremacy doctrine has infiltrated all police departments. And they believe they have to go out and do raids. They got the Goon Squad. They have the Serpent Squad. They have all these different squads. And primarily they police black and brown communities. And when they go out trying to hurt, lame, and do anything they can in order to please their white police, white supremacist system. So some of these blacks would never get promoted unless they're doing some vile and wicked things in order to please the white man and his wicked white supremacist system. So therefore they go out and beat other blacks, arrest other blacks, and do all of these things. So for me, it's still plantation America as it was in the 1600s. It's still plantation America as it is today in 2023. And the white supremacist system will use any black person to go against other black people that they want to eliminate. So I just want to say that. So the slaves went through contextual violence. They went through strategic violence, territorial violence, and retaliatory violence and ritualistic violence. They went through horrification, brutalization, and abandonment. Now, example of horrification would be if your little 4-year-old or 5-year-old saw some white Europeans or the white supremacy take a black man and put him in front of the yard, make sure his father's there, his mother's there, and everybody, and they sick some big Rottweilers on him and had that Rottweiler to pull him and eat him up right in their face. That's called being horrified. Well, the Europeans would do that with slaves. They would do that over and over again, so the slaves would not feel that they could escape nor run or fight back. So that's where we get the word horrification. Then they have brutalization. That means they beat you so bad over and over and over again until you don't even know what's going on. They're just beating you, and they do that publicly. Know this, that everything that the white supremacists do to black people, they like to publicize it. Why? Because they want to send a message to those that may try to disobey or not fall in line with what they need to fall in line with. And that's why they like to publicize it. That's why they want everybody to watch it. They want you to continue having this mindset of being toxified by the European system. It's important for you to know that. So then once they do that, they abandon you. They leave you by yourself, and no other blacks have a tendency to come help you because they're afraid if they help you that the white European supremacist system will come and do the same thing to them. This is where we're at. This is not in the 1600s. We're now living in 2023. So for us as black people, we must detoxify our minds from violence. We must see each other as brothers and sisters and love each other And the only way we can do that is that we must take the chains off of our minds. We have been locked down with the chains on the mind. And that's the picture you see behind me, is that we must be detoxified. And many of us have not been detoxified. Most of the time when prisoners of war come from a place where they've been held captive, and black people, whether you know it or not, you are prisoners of war. We're the only people in America that did not volunteer to come here. We're what you call forced migration. They made us come here. And we was jumping off boats, jumping off ships, trying to cause uprising on ships. We was doing all kind of stuff all the way here. And when we got here, we was fighting ever since. So basically, black folks, my brother and my sister, we have been fighting for 500 years, and we have not had a break to detoxify our minds. So we have to take ourselves through individual detox. So I want to give you this so you can understand that you may have to do it individually or collectively with people that you know. You see, the trauma from slavery can actually be passed down through your genes. The epigenetics by Dr. Rachel Yehuda, professor of psychiatry and Icahn School of Medicine at Mount Sinai, conducted an in-depth study of research into epigenetics and the intergenerational transmission of trauma from slaves. In other words, a lot of the violence you're seeing, us killing each other, a lot of that is intergenerational and the epigenetics that was passed down through genes. So we are doing to us what the white man was doing to us before. And it's a proven fact that we have passed down. We've learned violence from the Europeans. You go to the continent of Africa right now, my wife and I, we was over there for about 3 weeks, and just being there, we didn't even see no violent act. We didn't see nobody cussing nobody out, drinking, getting high. We are a loving people. We are a kind people. But we've learned some of the violence, some of this horrific violence from the Europeans. You see, the slave experienced the intergenerational transmission of slave pathology. The slave experienced the intergenerational transmission of slave pathology. Sociologist Dr. Joy DeGruy described it this way. She said, as she did a study on post-traumatic slave syndrome. So many of us are still going through post-traumatic slave syndrome because we never had a chance to do a re-entry into society, to talk about what we've been through, to talk about how bad slavery was. We didn't get that. All they told us was take root or die. Pull yourself up by your bootstrap and live or die. That's what we was told by the American system of white supremacy. So Dr. Joy DeGruy said it this way. She said that most blacks are still going through post-traumatic slave syndrome as we're passing down the epigenetic gene of our forefathers, because we're practicing now. What you're seeing is black on black violence, black killing blacks, black doing that. That's because the European had already trained us by killing us. And by them killing us over and over again, hanging us on trees, by them doing all of that, that begins to get into your genes. It's kind of like a person that is an alcoholic pass on the predisposition of his genes to his son. If the son don't know it, he'll be acting out in ways that he don't even know why he's acting out in that way. So I just want to make sure you understand that this is very dangerous for us, but we can come out of it. But we have to go through a detoxification of our mind. You see, detoxing and decolonization, the black mind is a meaningful act. In other words, to decolonize yourself from colonization and to detox yourself from slavery is something that you need to do. It's a meaningful act. It takes discipline and it takes practice. We must heal from the forces of slavery, of colonialism. And that was primarily practiced in Africa and some parts of the United States that perpetuate the subjugation and exploitation of black minds. See, the European don't mind that you're being free, okay? Okay, let's say, you have these chains, okay? If these chains are not on your hand, they're not on your legs, they're not on your body, the Europeans say, okay, well, they taken off the chains through the Emancipation Proclamation of their body. Abraham Lincoln signed an executive order in 1863. So these chains was taken off our body and off our legs. But then there's another chain. That's the one right there in the back. That's the chains on your mind. See, are you still a slave posing as someone that's free? So we have to do that individually as well as collectively. We have to break the chains off our mind, off our body, off our spirit, and off our land. And as we do that as a people, we have not yet went through the detoxifying process from our drama of slavery, which means we have the tendency to pass on these dramatization factors to our children. And as a result, you're thinking that, this shouldn't happen, but violence was passed on to us. And since most of us, or some of us, are terrified to use that same thing against any other group, what we end up doing is doing it to ourselves. And we have coined it this way. We call it crabs in a bucket. When one trying to get out, the other one pulling back in. Well, see, that's what we're practicing with this violence all over America in these cities. But blacks must detoxify and declutter their minds from the odious toxicity of white supremacy and brainwashing that was given unto us. We can do it. We can do it. We must detoxify our minds. Each one of us can do this individually. I've already done it. My mind is clear. I detoxified myself years ago. Well, the question is, how do you detox yourself? You can do it individually as well as collectively. But since we're in this situation, it's hard for blacks to come together without white people wanting to be a part of it, because they want to come together to see what you're talking about. So you have to take this on individually. It's like the Underground Railroad. You got to go to the Underground Railroad in your mind and say, I will not be a victim anymore. I am not a slave. I will act like I'm free. And I will not wait on the white man to open up doors for me. I will not wait on the white man to give me a book to read or to teach me my history. When you begin to go deep in on the Underground Railroad in your mind and begin to study for yourself, learn your history for yourself, you can individually detoxify your minds. And when people see you, they'll say, well, you're a militant, or you're a rebel, or why you this? No, you're free. They met some of your black friends or colleagues may say, man, dude is way off the chain. Dude he's too black for me. That's because they're not free. When you're free, you love your people, you love yourself, and you love what your people have made major contributions to the world. So you have to decide that I'm going to detoxify my mind. Also, you have the multi-generational oppression from centuries of chattel slavery into institutional racism that can leave. Now get this now. Let me say this again. The multi-generational oppression from for centuries of chattel slavery and the institution of racism can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes whose forefathers were in fact slaves. I got to say that again. The multi-generational oppression from centuries of chattel slavery and institutional racism can leave a chemical mark on a person's genes whose forefathers were in fact a slave. So it's this genetic predisposition that ended up coming on us, and we don't ask for it. It ended up coming because of our forefathers, of all the traumagenic factors that they went through. So we as blacks must detoxify our minds in order for us to move forward. We must detoxify our minds for what happened to us, with us, in us, and any other position about us. We have to do the work. You see, the intergenerational transmission epigenetic mechanism such as colonialization and slavery and the displacement of trauma. What happens is we learn how to displace trauma. We displace trauma by moving on to something else. And we hear people say, oh, well, that doesn't bother me. That doesn't hurt me. I'm good. I'm all right. Have a white person disrespect you and you say, I'm all right. We displace it. We move it on. And we had to do that during slavery, because if we didn't, our numbers would have been drastically low, because the Europeans would have killed most of us. Okay. We was forced into slavery. It's forced migration. We did not volunteer to be slaves. We rebelled on everything that came to us. We was not volunteers. It's forced migration. In essence, prisoners of war. Okay. We never got a pension plan. We never got any reparation. We never got anything that any other group would have got. Never got opportunities to get a good education. And the education that we get now in these European educational systems are no education. They're called indoctrination. They just want you to be good old happy slaves, good old happy Negroes. As long as you comply, you will not die. And that's how they want it. So the only way that we can liberate ourselves is by definitely doing a detoxification of our minds. Some of us are doing it individually, as I told you already. Some of us have been doing it for hundreds of years. Some of us are still waiting on the white man to tell us it's okay to do what we need to do. We're waiting on the white man for reparation. If you haven't figured it out about now, it ain't coming. And if it does come, it's going to be given out to everybody that's a part of it. Everybody going to be able to get some money. All these groups that's coming in trying to use the civil rights principles in order to get their way in, it's going to be divvied out to everybody. Now, I wouldn't be surprised if squirrels, rabbits, and cats get some too. Why? Because the system of the white supremacy system do not want to help black folks get to the level where we can do what we need to do. So let's stop waiting on that. Remember what I told you. Let's heal and build now, while we're detoxifying our minds on an everyday basis. Here's something else you need to know. The violence was physical as well as mental. See, mental violence take you through traumagenic factors, physical as well as mental. You see, if somebody slap you or cut you, that's going to heal. But if somebody mentally abuse you, that's going to stay with you for a while. Which means that you got to detoxify your mind. You have to want to do it. You have to want to detoxify your mind. Many of us have shackles that are no longer on our arms. You've seen this change. No longer on us anymore. Nothing around your neck, nothing holding you down when you walk. You can walk free, but your mind is still in prison. Your mind is still a slave. I did a spoken word on a slave mind cannot function in a freed society. When you break the chains off your mind, then you'll be able to hear the drum beats of the past and embrace the future. Now is the time. Many of us still got a slave mind trying to pretend to be free. But in order for you to detoxify your mind, we must transform our mind by renewing it. And we renew our mind by knowing our history. That's how you renew your mind as black people dealing with the physical. You renew your mind as knowing your history. And you got to go all the way back. And I do a Black Love lecture series on our history. You got to go all the way back. And once you go all the way back and you bring yourself up before slavery, the detoxification has started. So you was a free person before the Europeans came and forced you to come to America. You need to know what happened before slavery, not about what happened while in slavery. That's a part of it. But you was a freed people, you was a freed man, freed woman, and you had great contributions you made to the world that many of the Europeans have stolen, and many of the people in the Catholic Church have stolen. We are a great people. But many of us don't know we're great, so we're still living as slaves, waiting on the white man to give us permission to do everything. You're scared to meet with black folks because you're worried about, are they going to come and do something to us? No. When you have a free mind, that ain't even on your mind. You ain't worrying about what white people are going to do. It's more about what we're going to do as black people. Okay. But in order for that to happen, we must go through the detoxification process individually as well as collectively. But since black folks are scared to get together with them collectively, and if they do, they always got to have somebody white in the group, and first thing you hear, well, we love everybody, but everybody don't love you. When are you going to get that through your head? We are loving people. You want to know what our greatest strength is? Our greatest strength is love and compassion for everybody. That's our greatest strength as black people, as Africans. You don't want to know what our greatest weakness is? Our greatest weakness is love and compassion for everybody on the planet. That's who we are. We love everybody. We have hospitality for everybody. That's our greatest weakness and our greatest strength. And you know what they do? They come in and play us. They use us. And some of us think because white people join your group, join your organization, that they join it because they want to be a part of what you're doing. They could be joining it to sabotage what you're doing. We welcome everybody, but when it comes to a black person that's outspoken, that know who he is, know where he's going, and trying to take his people to the same place, we reject him because we don't want the world to look at us like, that we rebels, and we want the white man to see us as good Negroes, as good black folks. We got a good one over here. He ain't going to do nothing. He ain't going to run off the plantation. He ain't going to create no problems. He's not going to do what Malcolm X was talking about. He's not a Nat Turner. He's a Jesse Peters. And Jesse Peters was the first ordained preacher during slavery time, and his whole job was to manage the plantation wherever he went. And how did he do it? He would go and report to the white man and say, hey, the slaves need this, slaves need that. And when the white man give it to him, he'd go back and give it to them, and everybody think he's such a good guy. See, he was a minister. He was the one that was managing the plantation. Are you managing the plantation because you're afraid to speak up for who you are? Are you managing the plantation because you just want to go through the trauma? And one of these days, it's going to be over in the by and by. It's been 500 years. And we've been singing, we shall overcome. It's been 500 years. We've been crying, no justice, no peace. You know why we do that? You know why we're quick to forgive? It's because it has been a part of the epigenetic transformation of transgenerational and intergenerational pathology. We do that to protect ourselves. We don't want to ruffle any feathers, because if we do that, we don't know if we're going to be here too long. So it's important for you to know, when you learn your history and go back as far as you can, you learn your history, you are detoxifying your mind. You are detoxifying your mind. We must go through the detoxification process of what we have been beaten into us. We are not animals. We are not property to be used and discarded for the last 500 years. So as blacks, we have been responding, and we have been reacting and not responding to white supremacy, stating and crying out loud, get your boot off my necks. It's been 500 years and the boot is still on our necks. So what are we going to do now? Still cry? 500 years of going to the master's house, going to the plantation, going begging the white man to do this for us. And the only reason why we do those type of things, the only reason why we do it is because our minds are decluttered. Our minds are cluttered and toxified. We have been psychosocially brainwashed. We have been psychosocially programmed to go to the white man so he can open up doors for us. Now, there are many of us that have already been detoxified. Many of us ain't waiting, and I'm one. And I know a few other brothers that ain't waiting. We don't have time to wait for the white man to have a good day and say, okay, we're going to do this. Just think about it. 1863, half of the country wanted to keep blacks as slaves. And really, it was about 3/3. And one president, Abraham Lincoln, called himself trying to do us a favor. But the only reason why Abraham Lincoln freed the slaves, here's the reason why he did it: to preserve the Union. He knew if he didn't do it, he could not be able to stop what was going to happen after that. So Abraham Lincoln is not some great president. All you got to do is research him. He's a president that realized that if he didn't free the slave, the country was going to go up in smoke. Okay? So you have to understand why they do what they do. Why hasn't it been since 246 years why we still haven't got reparation? Have you ever thought about that? I mean, person after person after person. And I know we have these new folks coming up thinking that this is brand new, but no, there's been hundreds of people all over the United States have put up reparation packets over and over and over and over again. Look it up. They've already put the package out there, many of them over and over again. And what do America do? They say, we'll get to it. You know, it's kind of like having something on your desk and say, you know, we'll get to it later. 10 years go by. Oh, yeah, we hear what you're saying, but we'll get to it later. And then they may use phrases like this here: well, the country's not ready for that right now. But you was ready to force us to come to America to build this place, but you're not ready to pay your debt. Why? Because you do not want black folks to come up and rise. When black people was owning their own buildings and building their own neighborhoods, white folks struggled. They barely could make it. So that's why integration came in. It didn't come in because they wanted to next door to them. It came in because they needed that $1.5 trillion of the black power. And now some of us Negroes are so happy because we're thinking that we done did something. And it's been 400, 500 years later, and we still only making, I think now, it to move up to $2 trillion a year annually. And you know what we do? We bodaciously go back and give all of our money to the white man and wonder why we still living in ghettos and barrios, don't have no power, planting guns and drugs in our community. Why? Because you have still been living under trauma. You have not detoxified your mind. And I believe that's why God wanted me to do this. He wanted me to tell you that we must detoxify our minds and begin to do the things that we know we can do. You see, this violence was, as I said, was not only mental, but it was physical with the shackles. And once the shackles have been removed, here we are still walking around with mental shackles on our brain. The only way you take it off is knowing your history, knowing where you came from, knowing where you're going. And you will stop once you know where you came from, knowing that you're not an animal, knowing that you're not somebody's property. You'll stop running around reacting to this situation, but you'll respond to the situation by understanding that the white European racist system is not going to do anything for black folks other than throw breadcrumbs. They like you to stay on the perpetual hamster wheel of gradualism. As long as you're on the perpetual hamster wheel of gradualism, they'll feed you a couple things. You'll be the first to do this, the first to do that, but they won't pay reparation. Why? Because reparation sets us apart from everybody. Reparation says now we can build our own black nation within the United States. Know this, get this also. We are men and women, children of great forefathers. We're descendants of great forefathers who are builders and founders of the great ancient world civilization. Only when we truly come to know where we came from and where we are truly going, then we're beginning to start the process of detoxifying our mind. I ask some people from time to time when they come up and talk to me, you know, and they looking around and, you know, and we can be in a public place talking, and white people can be walking by all around, and they want to pull me over to the corner and ask me a question. I said, no, ask the question right here. And they said, well, you see. I said, that doesn't matter. I said, are you black? And they said, well, yeah, I'm black. I said, are you afraid to be black? Well, I just don't want to offend. I said, you've been offended your whole life, and ask me a question in front of some European, you worried about offending them? I said, just ask the question. And they finally asked the question, and I answered the question. See, some of us are afraid of being black. Some of us still have the master syndrome. where if the white man is around, we get scared. The white man is around, we don't want to say nothing because we're worried about what he gonna think and what he gonna say. See, when you're a free black man or free black woman, those are the last thoughts that come to your head. Why? Because you're black, you love being black, you know who you are, and you're not toxified. You don't care what they think about you. Their history proved to what they think about you. So we have to get to the point where we know where we came from and we know where we're going. And in that, we began to detox as an individual. And you pray to God that there are other blacks that are beginning to detox as an individual. So when you know who our forefathers were Imhotep. He was the first medical doctor. He studied the science. He studied the stars. He was a poet. He was a great man. He was the builder of the ancient step pyramids. He was the first medical doctor in the world, on the planet. Imhotep. That's Imhotep. Imhotep. A brilliant brother, a brilliant black man. Learn his history. Then you have Mansa Musa. Mansa Musa was a wealthy businessman. He made over $400 billion. $400 billion. He went from Mali to Mecca. And when he went from Mali to Mecca, everywhere he went, he was giving out money. He caused the stock exchange in those times to just shut down because he was giving out money. $400 billion. His commodity was ivory and gold. He did a lot of, and salt. He did a lot of great stuff. But see, the Europeans don't want you to know about him, because when you know about him, then your mind begins to change. You begin to move that detoxification. Then we have Queen of Sheba. Her name is Makeda. She was the one that was in love with Solomon. Queen of Sheba. Did some brilliant work. Now, these are just a few people I'm talking about. Then you have Shaka, king of the Zulus, a war man who was in South Africa and was fighting in South Africa and ran some of the Dutch and the British out. Why? He was a war man. Then you have King Hannibal. King Hannibal, another war man that also went over to Rome and almost destroyed Rome by himself. He ended up taking 40 war elephants, up to the Alps, and they got up in Rome. And they was almost about to take Rome over. As Queen Makeda, she was 17 years old, and she was about to destroy Rome. But the Europeans don't want you to know the great exploits that we've done. The ancient Dogons of Mali. The ancient Dogons of Mali was the head of NASA way back in antiquity. NASA is now trying to study what they was doing. They was already reading the galaxies. They knew about the Milky Way. They knew about all of the planets. These are the ancient Dogons that was already reading the stars. This is how we know that the Magi, when Mars and Jupiter came together, they created the supernova that told the world where Christ was. But they don't want you to know that. You come from some great people. And I just want you to know it's time for you to detoxify your minds. Another great man that's present right now, his name is Dr. O. Mensah, a black man who is an inventor of fiber optics and nanotechnology, who also built the first bullet train. And China right now has a bullet train that was created by a black man, Dr. Thomas O. Mensah, who created the first bullet plane. Dr. Mensah is also responsible for the internet and created a black Disney's world. The Europeans don't want you to know who you are. They want you to be thinking that you're a slave. They want you to be thinking that they're the greatest people on the planet. Also, he is an urban intellectual and holds 14 patents and is founder of the National Academy of Inventors. This is a black man. Built all those things, but most black folks in America don't know it because our brains are toxified. Also, a brother by the name of Dr. Mark Dean, a black man, inventor of the computer processor chip. He holds 3 of 9 patents and co-creator of the IBM personal computer released in 1980. Did they tell you about him? No, because the white Europeans love to steal our stuff and say they did it. So you black folks in America and around the world would think all you are just good, happy slaves. But then they already know that we're the ones that built the ancient pyramids. We're the ones that did all this great stuff, but they don't want you American blacks, and even on the continent of Africa, they don't want them to know it as well. But I'm here to detox your mind. Another brother by the name of Dr. Mark Dean, a black man, invented the computer process. Well, we read that. But Dr. Philip, here's the brother that I was looking for. Dr. Phillips Iwali, a Nigerian, a black man who invented the internet and cell phone. Now somebody's shocked. Invented the internet and the cell phone? Oh yeah, the one that you can't get off of? That came from Africa. Okay. All of the cobalt and the lithium and all of that stuff, that comes from Africa. But they go over to Africa, still our stuff come back to present it to us as though they did it, because some of us don't think that we can do anything. Why? Because your mind is toxified. Your mind has been toxified with all this European stuff, where you thinking the Europeans are the greatest people on the planet. Even when you pray, you probably see a white Jesus in your mind. When you talk to God, you see a white God. Why? Because your mind is toxified. That's why you see that. Whenever you think of something positive, you think of whites. Why? Because they have brainwashed us and caused us to think of them as God while we're praying to God. That's detoxification, and I'm here to detox your mind. Okay. Another brother by the name of, two brothers by the name of Henry T. and Samson Jesse Lee Russell, 2 men also co-invented the cell phone, working together with the brothers that I was telling you about before. Okay. These are things that black folks have been doing for decades and centuries, but we never get credit for it. You remember how they want to say that the pyramids was built by aliens because they did not think blacks were civilized to build it? But they now come to understand that we've done it. We built all of this stuff. Why? Because God had did something different in our mind. Some say our DNA series number is 9 and everybody else is 6. So as a result of that, God has shown favor to his people. Okay, so I want you to start to declutter and detoxify your mind. And that's what this is all about. You see, when we study who we were, we will know who we are. And when we know who we are, our minds will be detoxified. I'm going to say that again. When we study who we were, we will know who we are. And when we know who we are, our minds will be detoxified. And when our minds are detoxified, we will move in the black African pride of loving ourselves and being unified. That's what everybody hates. They do not want us as any people to come together, because when we come together, they lose. When we build, they stuff just fall down, because they've been stealing from us for centuries. So when we come together and love each other and build and heal, they lose out. So that's what this is about. So black people all over the world, in the diaspora and throughout the continent of Africa, I just want you to know this. Let me say it again. Black people all over the world. We are 250 million black folks in the diaspora, all over the world in the diaspora. We are roughly 150 billion black people on the continent of Africa, and some say quickly moving to 200 million. And the average age group of those on the continent of Africa or between anywhere from 18 to 29, maybe 30. Africa is a young continent, and we must make sure that the Africans that went through colonialism, their minds must be detoxified. And if their minds are detoxified and those in the diaspora minds are detoxified, meaning that they have been through detox, they know who they are, they know where they came from, and they know where they're going. We must detoxify our minds. And when our minds are detoxified, as I said, we can love each other, build on each other. So I close with this. Black people, we are the most brilliant people in the world. Black people, we are the most excellent people in the world. Black people, we are the most creative people in the world. And black people, we know we are the most resilient people in the world. So let us move individually as well as collectively as we move through detoxifying our mind. We must go through detoxifying. We must know who we are. We must know where we came from, and we must know where we're going. So I trust you can believe it. I trust you can receive it. I trust you understand that as black people, we have an assignment, and our assignment is to do it individually as well as collectively as we begin to do what we know we need to do. We need to detoxify our minds, to detox, which means that we must get our clutter out of our minds. We must get all of the negative stuff out of our minds and know who we are as a people. And when we do that, then we can heal, then we can build great civilization as our forefathers. I trust you can believe it. I trust you can receive it. And I trust that you will begin to work on your own mind, detoxifying your mind. And the way you do that is by knowing your history, knowing where you came from, and then you will truly know where you're going. God bless you. Until next time.